The hunting grounds of Vareth Prime stretched endlessly beneath twin crimson suns, where death stalked on four legs and fear was a concept reserved for prey. Silka moved through the crystalline forest with the fluid grace of her species. The Velkari, apex predators who had dominated their world for 10,000 years before reaching the stars. Her obsidian fur absorbed light like a void, and her amber eyes could track thermal signatures through solid rock. She stood nearly 8 feet tall on her hind legs with retractable claws that could slice through reinforced steel, and jaws powerful enough to crush bone into powder. Silka feared nothing. Fear was for the weak, for the hunted, for species that had forgotten the taste of blood on their tongues. The human outpost on the frontier world of Terminus 7 was supposed to be a simple assignment. The Galactic Coalition had established a way station there, and Silka had been contracted as security, a role she found insultingly beneath her capabilities. Humans, she had been told, were fragile creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel. Despite their obvious physical inadequacies, they lacked claws, proper fangs, protective fur, and any sensible predatory instincts. They were, by all evolutionary standards, prey animals that had accidentally discovered fire. The maintenance bay where Jaren Kor worked smelled of ozone, lubricant, and something else. Something that made Silka's ears flatten instinctively against her skull. The human was unremarkable at first glance. Average height for his species, wearing oil-stained coveralls with short-cropped dark hair, and hands perpetually stained with grease. He was currently suspended beneath a massive plasma drive assembly, muttering to himself in that peculiar human way. "You gonna stand there all day, or are you actually here for something?" Jaren's voice echoed from beneath the machinery without him even looking at her. Silka's tail lashed with irritation. Her species' natural stealth was legendary. Prey animals would flee at her mere scent, and even other predators gave her wide berth. Yet this human had detected her presence without apparent effort. "The bay requires security inspection," Silka growled, her translator rendering the clicks and snarls of her native tongue into flat standard. "Security inspection." Jaren slid out from beneath the drive on a wheeled platform, finally looking up at her. His eyes, those strange forward-facing human eyes, met hers without flinching. "Right, well, inspect away. Try not to touch anything. Some of this stuff could vaporize you before your nervous system registered the pain." Silka's claws extended involuntarily. In her culture, maintaining eye contact with a predator was a challenge, a prelude to violence. Yet Jaren simply wiped his hands on a rag and stood, moving past her to a workbench as if she were nothing more than another piece of equipment. The days that followed established an uncomfortable pattern. Silka found herself drawn to the maintenance bay, ostensibly to fulfill her security duties, but truly because Jaren Kor represented something that fundamentally disturbed her worldview. He worked with machinery that could kill him in 1,000 different ways, often placing himself in positions of extreme vulnerability, yet he moved with absolute confidence. When a plasma conduit ruptured during one of his repairs, spewing superheated gas that would have incinerated most beings, Jaren had simply rolled aside, sealed the breach with his bare hands protected only by thermal gloves, and continued working as if nothing had happened. "Doesn't that frighten you?" Silka had asked, her translator barely able to convey the genuine curiosity in her voice. Jaren had looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite parse. "Fear's just information," he'd said. "Tells you where the danger is so you can deal with it. Being scared of something doesn't make it go away." The concept was alien to her. In Velkari culture, fear was weakness, something to be eliminated through strength and dominance. Yet Jaren seemed to suggest that humans acknowledged fear and then proceeded anyway. The truth of human nature revealed itself during the raid. Pirates, a mixed crew of Kravik marauders, breached the station's outer hull at 300 hours. Silka responded immediately, her combat instincts taking over. She killed the first 3 raiders before they fully entered the corridor, moving through them like wind through grass. Her claws found throats and her jaws closed on skulls, and in those moments she was what she had always been. Death incarnate, but there were too many. Even Silka, apex predator of an apex species, could be overwhelmed by numbers. She found herself cornered in the maintenance bay, bleeding from a dozen wounds, surrounded by 15 armed raiders. Her ammunition was depleted, her energy reserves fading. For the first time in her life, Silka felt something cold and unfamiliar coiling in her chest. Fear. Then Jaren emerged from the shadows behind a power coupling, He carried no weapon. He wore his usual coveralls and carried his standard toolkit. The raiders barely noticed him, another prey animal, helpless and weak. What happened next would haunt Silka's dreams for years. Jaren moved like no human she had ever seen. He used the environment itself as a weapon, rerouting power conduits to electrocute 2 raiders, venting atmospheric processors to flash freeze 3 more, causing a magnetic containment field to collapse and crush another 4 against the bulkhead. When one raider finally got close enough to swing at him, Jaren caught the arm, rotated his body with mechanical precision, and used the raider's own momentum to send him crashing through a control panel that exploded in a shower of sparks. It wasn't the savagery that shocked Silka. She had seen and inflicted far worse. It was the calculated nature of it. Jaren wasn't fighting like a predator. He was fighting like an engineer solving a problem, using every tool at his disposal, turning the entire bay into a death trap with himself as the bait. The remaining raiders fled. Jaren helped Silka to the medical bay, his hands gentle despite their strength, his voice calm as he explained her injuries to the medical AI. Only when she was stabilized did he return to the maintenance bay to begin repairs on the systems he'd damaged. "You were afraid," Silka said the next day, her wounds already healing with Velkari efficiency. "When you stepped out to fight them. I could smell it on you." Jaren didn't stop working, didn't turn around. "Yeah, I was terrified. Yet you acted anyway. That's what humans do." Jaren finally looked at her, and in his eyes, Silka saw something she'd never expected to find in a prey species. Not fearlessness, but something far more dangerous. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you do it anyway. Silka's worldview shattered that day and reformed into something new. She had spent her entire life believing that fear was weakness, that the absence of fear defined strength. But Jaren had shown her a different truth. Humans didn't conquer fear by eliminating it. They conquered it by walking through it, by using it as fuel rather than letting it become a barrier. In the weeks that followed, Silka began to understand why humans had spread across the galaxy, despite their physical limitations. They were persistence predators not of flesh but of spirit. They felt fear more acutely than most species precisely because they were more vulnerable. Yet they had built civilizations, conquered worlds, and reached for the stars anyway. Jaren Kor continued his work, oblivious to or unconcerned with the philosophical revolution he'd sparked in an alien predator. He fixed machines, solved problems, and occasionally glanced up at Silka with that small, knowing smile that suggested he understood exactly what she was going through. Silka still feared nothing in the traditional sense, but now she understood that true courage, the kind that had carried humanity from the caves to the cosmos, wasn't about the absence of fear. It was about facing the abyss and saying, "Not today." And that, she realized, was far more terrifying than any predator she'd ever faced.